Hey guys, it's Rogway here, and I'm back with another tutorial. And today we are going to be looking at variables. And variables are really, really important when it comes to programming because they are kind of like storage containers for data. All right, so if we want to hold some piece of information in our game, we use variables to store that data. That data could be anything. It could be a score, it could be your username, it could be an item, it could be pretty much anything that you want to store and use for later or check to see if you have it or whatever. In this case, we're looking at a file called Cookie Clicker. And we've got a coin and we've got a vending machine. And the idea here is that you cannot use the vending machine until you pick up the coin. All right. And the way this might be used in a game is let's say you have a level that a person wants to unlock and maybe they need to find the key before they can get to that level. This would be a perfect example of where you would use a variable to track whether they had picked up the key or not. In this case, it's going to be a coin. So building off of our last tutorial, you're going to see down here that I've got two layers. I've got a graphics layer, which just has our two images on there. And they have both been converted to button symbols. All right. And I also have an actions layer here that has an action applied to it. So I'm going to go to that layer. I'm going to right click and I'm going to go to actions. And you're going to see here that this is a very, very simple setup. Hopefully this makes sense to you because of our last tutorial, we covered this. We have a stop, which means that it's going to wait for somebody to do something. And then we've got a section here for the coin. Okay, so this is the section for the coin button. You can see it says coin. And right now, when it's clicked, it goes to scene 1, which is basically the scene we're in. This one here is for the vending machine. And you'll see that when that gets clicked, it goes to scene 1. So currently, this program does nothing. All right, when you click these buttons, whether it's the coin or the vending machine, it's just going to take you back to the same scene. So it's really not doing anything right now. But what I wanted to talk about is this section right here within our code. And this is really, really important because when we use code snippets to add this chunk of code to our actions, what it's actually doing is creating something called an event listener, which means it's listening for when the mouse gets clicked in this case. And also it creates a function. Okay, this is a function right here. And a function is like a set of commands that it will run anytime the coin is clicked. Okay, so if we read this like a language, you can see here that the coin has an event listener attached to it. The event listener is listening for the mouse event, which in this case is a click. And when it detects it, it will run this function, which is right here. Okay, this is the same name. So what it's going to do is when it detects a click on the coin, it's going to run this function. And it's the same for the vending machine. All right, and functions work basically like I said, like a set of commands. And the commands that run when the coin is clicked are within these two curvy brackets. All right, so you see that there's an opening bracket, it's a left facing bracket, and a closed bracket, it's a right facing bracket. And actually what Animate will do is it will make it easier along the left hand side with this little minus symbol to close or to see what's inside of that particular method or function. All right, sorry, sometimes I'll say method because other programs use the word method, but in ActionScript it's function. All right, so like I said, this is a set of commands. So to test this out, to actually see if we could change this, what we're going to do is we're going to actually eliminate this line altogether. We're going to get rid of it. All right, and one thing I want to mention is that if you want to add more spaces to make your stuff more organized, the program or the game that you're building does not see the spaces anyway. So if you want to, space things out and make it more organized for yourself, totally fine. So anyways, now what I'm going to do is inside of this function, I'm going to put a new piece of code that you guys haven't seen before, and it's called a debug log. Oops, sorry. Debug log. Actually, no, let's do it a different way. We're going to do a trace. Okay, we'll do a trace, and we're going to put a message in here. It's going to be in quotations, and I'm going to say, you clicked the coin. Now, the reason I'm not going to do a debug log is because that is a different programming language, and I got a little mixed up there. A trace is super, super useful, and you can use a trace to check your code all the time. What this is going to do is we replaced the original chunk of code, which was the same as down here, that when it clicks, it goes to scene 1. And instead now, we are going to output a message to our console that tells us that we've clicked the coin. Okay, so watch. Now if I go control test it out, you'll see that when you click the coin, oh, it's hard to see here because my screen is full screen. Let me just shrink it down. There it is. You can see in the output here in the program that when I click the coin, it's telling me you clicked the coin. All right? So what we've done, like I said, is we've replaced the original command that was in there with a new command that tells it when the coin is clicked, it's going to play this function right here, and the function's instruction will be to trace out or to tell us on screen, that's what the point of the trace is, that you clicked the coin. And you can see that it's working perfectly. All right? We could do the same to the vending machine, but I think you guys understand how that works, so I'm not going to repeat it. If you want to put a trace down here, you click the vending machine, you can. But let's get into some more advanced settings here to actually detect if the coin was picked up. So like I said at the start of the video, we got to use something called variables. And variables is a container for data. And there's a lot of different types of variables. And in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to use a variable called an integer. And one thing about programming in general is there is a lot of math, but if you understand the math, it's not necessarily super complicated math unless you get into really advanced stuff. Once you understand the math, it's pretty easy. So to create a variable, up at the under the stop, okay, we're going to create a variable that starts before the program even begins. So we're going to put a space there. We could just make some space in here for it to go in. We would type VAR, and VAR is short for variable. And then we're going to give it a name. I'm going to call it, do we have the coin? Okay? You can call it whatever you want, as long as it's not the same as any of the built-in functions, like commands that are in here, like trace and stuff, the commands that are already there. So we're going to give it a name. I said, do we have the coin? And then I'm going to tell it what type of variable it needs to be. And in order to do that, you're going to put a colon, and then you're going to do the short version of what type of variable it is. In this case, it's an integer, so it's int. And an integer variable is a variable that stores whole numbers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, any whole number, or -1, -2, -3. A number that does not have a decimal place, okay? That's how an integer works. That's the only one we're going to cover today. Okay, so the variable has been created. We've given it a name. Do we have a coin? We told it that it's going to be an integer variable, which means it's going to store whole numbers. And we're going to put, after this, we're going to give it a value. We're going to put equals 0. And we're going to put a semicolon. All right, so let me explain. We made a variable. We gave it a name. We told it it's going to be an integer. And we assigned it a value of 0, which means that, like I said, these are data containers. We put a 0 into this container, okay? So it now has a value of 0. And just to check that this is actually working, in our trace down here where we said you click the coin, let's change this. Let's get rid of the quotations. You only use quotation when you want to use text. And let's put, do we have the coin? Now, very, very, very important that this spelling, oh, you see I made a mistake. This spelling has to be exactly the same as this name, or else it will not work. Okay, so let's test that. What do you think is going to happen when we click that? Any guesses? Well, it's going to display this integer, this variable, sorry, in our console. And it's going to display the value of that variable. And because that variable is set to 0, then every time we click the coin, it should put a 0 in the output. So let's see if it works. Control test. We click the coin, and there's the zeros showing up, which means that the program knows that the variable is the value of the variable is 0. Okay, it understands that. All right. Now, how can we use this to actually implement it into our game? How can we make our game recognize that we've picked up the coin? Well, what we can do is when the coin is clicked, we could have the variable change to something like a 1, which would represent that it's been picked up. Okay, so we would do this. Before the trace happens inside of this function, we'll put a space, and above it we'll say, do we have the coin is equal to 1. All right, so when you click the coin, it now gets set to 1. And an easy way to think of this is 0 could be like we don't have the coin, and 1 means we now have the coin. All right, and now the trace should be 1. It won't be 0, it'll be 1 because it's changed here to 1, and then it's going to tell us what the value is. And if we want to get a little bit fancy, we could tell it to take whatever item, in this case it's the coin, and have it disappear from our screen. So we would put coin dot visible, which is a command for making something either showing or not showing, equals false. And what that's going to do, if we read what this function is doing, when the coin is clicked, the variable changes to have a value of 1. We trace out the 1 to our output, so we'll see 1 here. And the coin itself will disappear. Okay? So let's test that. Control test. Click the coin, and there you go. It set it to 1. It's disappeared. We can no longer click it. And now we know that the program knows that we have a coin in our inventory. Okay, so think of it as we have 1 coin. All right, so now we have 1 coin in our pocket. All right, now we're going to get into one other thing in this tutorial, and then we're going to be done with it. We're going to look at something called conditional logic is what I would call it. And in this case, for this example, I want you to think of the 2 words, if and then. And we use this in the English language all the time. Let me give you an example. If I study hard, then I will pass the test. If I practice, then I will get better at whatever sport that I'm practicing or whatever I'm practicing. If and then is an example of a conditional logic. And in programming, it's used all the time. The if statement is pretty common, okay? And let me show you how we can implement this to make it work for this game. It's a very simple game, by the way. You get the coin and it's over. Here's how we would do that. We're going to replace what happens when we click the vending machine. So we're going to get rid of this line just like we did for the coin. And now we're going to put if, and we're going to use brackets. These are the curved brackets. Do we have the coin? Double equals, okay? You use a double equals because it's going to be comparing the number we put here, in this case 0, to the value of the variable. So if do we have the coin is equal to 0, then, okay, we're not going to type then is represented by a curly bracket. Okay, what we've just created is basically, it's kind of like a function inside of a function, because now inside of these brackets, we're going to tell it what to do if the variable is set to 0, which basically means at the start of the game, we don't have a coin. It's going to be 0. So why don't we do this? We'll have it trace out a message that says, you got no money. Okay? And we'll close that off. So this is similar to what we had done before when we were first testing out the trace. We are using quotations because it's a word, it's a sentence. You always put quotations around a sentence, and then don't forget your semicolon. All right, so if the variable is set to 0, which it is at the start, it's going to tell us that we've got no money if we click the vending machine. Now keep in mind, it will not change to 1 until we actually click the coin. So that means if we click the vending machine first, it's going to tell us we've got no money. So let's try that. Control test. If I click the vending machine, you're going to see it says you got no money. And if I click the coin first and then the vending machine, nothing is going to happen. That's because we haven't told it what to do if we have a coin. All right, so what we're going to do next is we're going to put another if statement. We could even just copy this and paste it, but let's just, for the sake of getting the habit of writing these, we're going to put if do we have the coin equals 1, semicolon, oh, sorry, not semicolon, curly bracket, trace. You get, what do we get? Some beef jerky, I don't know, whatever the machine's giving out, okay? So now we have this conditional statement that if it's 0, we get nothing. But if we have a coin, we get something, all right? And so if I control test that, you'll see that if I click the machine, I got no money. I click the coin, I now have 1 coin, and I click the machine, I now get something from the machine. All right? So this conditional logic is really, really powerful, because if you're putting this into your game, and let's say you have to pick up a certain key or a certain item to advance in the game, then you can always put if statements into your code, just like this, and then whatever you want it to do, where maybe you want it to go to a different scene, or you want it to unlock an item, or something, you want something to change, whatever you put within these brackets, it's going to do. All right, so if we had taken that line from the beginning with the go to scene and play, that the one that we had taken out of here, then when we click it with 0, it would go to that scene. If we had the coin, in this case, it could be a key or whatever, then we could have it go to an alternate scene. So there's a lot of things you can do with this, and I recommend you guys really study this code very closely. Make sure you understand it, maybe even experiment with it, change it if you want to, just kind of see if you can make it do different things. And again, if you choose to implement this, it's up to you, but this is how you would implement both variables and conditional logic. All right, very, very powerful. And the trace is super useful. If you're looking for bugs in your game, the trace is going to save you a lot of headaches. It's a really, really good way to check to make sure your variables are doing what they're supposed to be doing. That's it for today, so save it, and we'll have another one coming up soon.